Today's going to be a great episode, folks. We're going to talk about Elon Musk, the self-driving feature on the Tesla, and a very unfortunate car crash that killed an Apple engineer, leaving behind his wife and two small children. A very good case, and you're going to learn a lot about the law while we talk about this interesting case. Stick around. Hello, my friends. How's it going? Good to see you folks back. As always, I enjoy being here, and I enjoy all the comments in the last week. And some people reached out to me with some questions. Keep them coming. My only complaint is I don't hear enough from everyone, and that'll always be my only complaint. That's how much I love hearing from all of you. So today we're going to talk about Mr. Walter Hong. Very sad. He died using the Tesla Autopilot in March of 2018. So this is over 6 years ago. And it took 6 years of legal haggling and to reach a settlement with Tesla. So his wife and two kids survived him. And they ended up suing Tesla, saying that the autopilot feature failed because he was using autopilot, and the Tesla, it was a 2017 Model X, ran into a concrete barrier on the freeway. This is in the Bay Area, going down the 101 South and then an interchange with the 85. And I happen to know, Teslas are a little bit quirky when it comes to freeways, like exits and on-ramps, especially exits. And sometimes it's like the car wants to exit, but it's like it gets confused a little bit. And over here, what ended up happening is, as the car was there, a lot of when there's a freeway exit, there's what's called, like, if there's a concrete barrier, that's called the concrete gore. Okay. And then in front of that, there's what's called, here's a little trivia. There's these little barriers in front of the concrete, and the purpose of them, here, I'll show you a picture right here. The purpose is to slow the car down a little bit and to dissipate some of the energy before the car hits the concrete. You know what those are called? I always say this word wrong. The crash attenuator. All right. So the purpose of this is that it's light in the sense that it won't cause a lot of damage if you hit it, but it'll at least slow the car down a little bit before you hit the concrete. You also see those big trash cans. You see the trash cans on the freeway. You know what I'm talking about? Same kind of concept. Like, it'll kind of soften the blow before the car hits the concrete. So it just so happened in this interchange that there was no crash attenuators. And why? Because 12 days prior to this poor guy's car crash that killed him, a Prius of all cars hit the same thing and broke the crash attenuator. And that was only 12 days prior to this, and the state of California hadn't yet put up a new crash attenuator. You know what I'm saying? And then also, there's some dispute as to why the Tesla didn't detect the lane change, or it didn't detect it well, obviously. And some of the reasoning is some of the lanes, the markings in the lanes were kind of being a little faded. And so Tesla believes that, maybe that's why it didn't recognize, where the lane was going very well, because of the fading on the markings. Now, this guy, the gentleman that crashed and died, he was an engineer at Apple, and he had a iPhone 8. Where's your iPhone at, Mateo? What number are you on? 12, 13? 13? Look at that little big shot here, Mateo. I'm still at the iPhone 1. No, just kidding. Those are collector's items now. You could get a lot of money if you have one of the original iPhones. So this guy had an iPhone 8, which was a big deal at the time because it was a developmental phone. So he had the phone super early, and so he was like testing it out and stuff. Sadly, he was also using it while he was driving. And the evidence indicated he was playing a video game while he was driving. So he wasn't really paying attention to the road. He was relying on the autopilot. The game was called Three Kingdoms. Have you ever played that before? No, you haven't played Three Kingdoms? You've seen the ads for it? I checked it out. There's only one game I play on my phone, and that's chess. I play it all day. Okay, I love it. So he was playing this game, but it's a very, very intensive game. So chances are, he's playing it. He's not paying attention to the road. Tesla, with the information they had, showed that during this drive, he had dropped off his kid. Oh, he had his two kids at the time were 3 and 6. Now they're 9 and 12. He dropped off his kid at preschool and was heading down to the Apple office when all of this happened. And during this 19 minutes of driving on autopilot, he had 3 alerts saying, "Get your hands on the wheel." You guys ever drive a Tesla? Or drive? No, come on, gents. I have a Tesla, sadly. I'm not showing off. It's actually, I hate this auto drive feature. Let me tell you why. For it to work, you have to have your hands on the wheel and you have to be looking at the road. And there's a little camera that detects whether or not you're looking at the road. And if you use your phone or you do something, it beeps you. And if you get your hands off the wheel, it beeps you. So what I always tell people is, and it's not Tesla, it's the federal government that made Tesla do this. So you have to do everything you have to do to drive so that the car drives itself. You see what I'm saying? So it's kind of Mateo's looking confused, and I agree. It's useless, right? I mean, what's the point? Like, if I always tell people, if I can't be sleeping in the back seat, like if it's not that trustworthy where I can just sleep in the back seat, then it's just useless. Anyway, okay. So he wasn't paying attention. He was relying on the auto drive features when he crashed into this. Now, this accident happened over 6 years ago. Oh, my son Jude is going to love this. The word accident, I remember when I was in driving training. This is like in the very early 90s. I'm an old man, Mateo, right? I remember the driving instructor, like when he was like teaching the class, he said something like, accident. There's no such thing as an accident. There's a car crash because somebody was an idiot and did something wrong, didn't follow the rules. The only time there's an accident is if some tree roots out of the ground and flies into the road. That's an accident. Otherwise, it's somebody being stupid. What do you think? So here, this is over 6 years ago. And now my goal here, that's been always my goal of the podcast, is to kind of explain how the law works and the intricacies of the law through these various stories. So why the heck did this take 6 years? Okay, this is what I'm going to now begin explaining. First order of business. All right, let's go over the paperwork. So when they filed the lawsuit, they wanted to depose Elon Musk. All right, and part of the reason is because before this crash happened in 2018, Elon Musk was boasting about this auto drive and all the autopilot features and the lane safety and the auto brakes and all that jazz. And so he made a lot of statements like this one in June of 2016. So this is about 2 years before the crash. Elon Musk said, and I quote, "I really consider autonomous driving a solved problem. I think we are less than 2 years away from complete autonomy, safer than humans, but regulations should take at least another year. On highways," this is the best part, "on highways, particularly highways that have barriers so that you don't have pedestrians, that's also relatively easy. A Model S and a Model X at this point can drive autonomously with greater safety than a person right now." All right, that's a good quote. You see what I'm saying? So they wanted to introduce this quote to the jury. And then they asked, they asked Tesla, well, did Elon Musk really say this? And in what's called the discovery. And Tesla said, we don't know. He could have, he could not have. There's a lot of deep fakes out there, people making things up, right? And stuff like that. Like, I read a silly rumor that Zeke could beat me in a freaking arm wrestling match. That's impossible. So anyhow, that is a very, very big quote there. And Tesla didn't admit that Elon Musk said that. And this is one of the reasons why, well, they said, we want to take Elon Musk's deposition. because you have to prove that he said that, something like that. And, so they want to take his deposition. Tesla said, no, you can't just take the president's deposition. It's too much effort, and he's too famous, and he's too busy, and he's blah, 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 right? So about a year of arguing about this, believe it or not. And there are rules about deposing the corporation's president and big shot, because every time someone sues, whatever, a Donald Trump apartment complex, the first person they're going to want to depose is Donald Trump, right? If they sue Tesla here, imagine every lawsuit against Tesla, they would want to depose, Elon Musk, or they'd want to depose, the late Steve Jobs when he was alive. Every time there was a dispute over an Apple issue, or what's the current CEO, the Tim Cook, good job. They'd want to depose him, or Rick Powell or something. So anyhow, they'd want to depose a big shot at the company, right? So now in this particular case, they wanted to depose Elon Musk. The company said no. And then there's all of this haggling. The law is that if you want to depose the head of the corporation, you have to have good cause to do it. And you have to have tried every other discovery avenue possible to get the information you want without having to depose him. And there's also a rule that there's a limit of in this particular case, the judge finally said, no, you've done all of that. You can depose him, but I'm going to limit it to 3 hours, and try to stick with all of these various quotes and just kind of talk about, did you say this? Did you say that? Things like that. In June of 2014, so 4 years before the crash, Elon Musk said, I'm confident that in less than a year, you'll be able to go from an on-ramp to highway exit without touching any controls. What do you think? Right? So all the arguments here pointing out that, okay, so this poor guy relied on, I always say poor guy because he's not around. I'm not trying to indicate whether or not he's responsible for the crash or whether Tesla's responsible. I'm just kind of saying that because he's not with us anymore. His lawyers are arguing that they relied on all of these quotes from Elon Musk to have, the situation where people became so, what would you say, like complacent that this self-driving deal can actually self-drive. Do you see what I'm saying? But in reality, it can't. Like, it messes up all the time. It just does. Just like a computer messes up, right? Or the phone's, it'll lock up. You know what I'm saying? You have to like restart it. In fact, there was a day with my Tesla, Zeke. I was at a light with my daughter, and the car completely turned off. Like, everything turned off. It couldn't go. It couldn't do anything. I had to restart the car at a red light. Isn't that weird? Thankfully, no one was behind me. But to this day, my 10-year-old daughter, like when I bring that up, she laughs. She goes, yeah, we have to restart it like a phone. Anyhow, okay. So now we're going to move on. So there's an upcoming trial, and this case settled for millions of dollars, but an undisclosed amount. Usually undisclosed amount means millions of dollars. The way it's calculated, if a jury thinks that Tesla's liable, meaning that Tesla was negligent in how it designed its autopilot and how it marketed the autopilot and the quotes that Elon Musk said. So if they find Tesla liable, that's the first thing. Then we go into, how much damages? The way when I used to teach law, I used to always tell people, if you prove liability, then I could tell you you're going to get a check. All right. So if I told you, Mateo, you're going to get a check, what's your next question? How much? Right? So if you get liability on Tesla, then you get a check from Tesla. But the question is how much? So part of that will depend on, he had 2 kids and it's a big emotional loss. So what's the value of the emotional loss? And then the other part is also what's the economic damage to the family? He's 38 at the time. Maybe he would have worked another 30 years, average of, $300,000 a year. So they just multiply that. That's about, a little over $10 million. And then they reduce it to present value and take out some money for what he would have maybe spent from that, blah, blah, blah. There is a mechanism. So we're talking in the multi-millions in terms of the value of this case if they can prove that Tesla is liable. All right. Now, when we get to the jury, in the way our legal system works, we're going to have a jury decide this. God, I know what I'm going to say. People are not going to like. In the civil cases, the Joe Samo theory is we should get rid of the jury system. I'm going to tell you why. Everyone always, I know. I got 3 people in here, and all of a sudden they're looking at me like I'm crazy. No, because for starters, all right, whatever the jury says, the judge could overrule it, completely overrule it. The judge can give a family more money. The judge could just wipe everything out and give what the judge wants. So my theory is, well, if the judge has the power to do that, then what's the freaking point of the jury? Why doesn't the judge just say in the beginning, hey, no matter what you do, I'm not going to give this guy more, or his family more than $1 million. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's the cap, damn it. So just decide between 0 or $1 million. Or the judge could just say, look, regardless of what you do, I'm going to dismiss the whole thing and give the family 0. You know what I'm saying? And that they like the jury because maybe the jury comes back and says 0. Do you know what I'm saying? Meaning like the defense verdict. And then the judge like, all right, well, let my hand, right? But in all reality, it was going to be that way anyway. Or the jury comes back and has like a $5 million verdict and the judge reduces it to 0, which would have been the outcome regardless. So anyway, that's just a little theory I have there. For criminal cases, I think it's still needed. All right, so because we have this jury, then there's for a couple of years, there's going to be this haggling over the trial and what is said to the jury and what isn't said to the jury. All right, so let me give you some examples. For one, they disputed a lot over the discovery, meaning, like this thing, like it took so long for them to be able to depose Elon Musk. It took so long, Tesla said, we don't know if he said that, when obviously he did say it and he had admitted it when he was under a testimony and stuff like that. The first order, one of the things that Tesla wanted to make sure is they said, well, let's make sure the jury never hears about all that, because then they're going to think we're a bunch of a-holes, right? That's not what they said. They're going, well, that's irrelevant to the lawsuit and blah, blah, blah. Do you know what I'm saying, Zeke? All right. And they're right. It is irrelevant, because the plaintiff's lawyer would love to say, you know how worried they were about this case? They wouldn't even let us depose Elon Musk until 3 years into it. And then he admitted everything after they wouldn't admit that he said that. All of that is inadmissible evidence, meaning you can't tell it to a jury. All right. But if we just didn't have the jury, anyway, it would have been faster. Okay. Another thing that they want to dispute over is this. The plaintiffs don't want, remember I said earlier, so this guy, he wasn't using his hands a lot, like on the steering wheel, and the Tesla systems notified him twice via like a visual kind of alert on the screen, and then one audio visual, like a little beep, 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 beep. The family's lawyers didn't want that evidence to be presented to the jury. They said, well, it's not relevant because they couldn't know, there's no evidence to show, at the exact moment of the crash, whether or not his hands was on the wheel. Like that was during the drive, but previous to the actual crash. Do you know what I'm saying? So during the actual crash, there's no evidence to suggest one way or another, so that it would be prejudicial if the jury knew that during that same drive, it beeped him or alerted him 3 different times in that 19-minute drive. You with me? What do you think? Relevant information? Yeah, I think so too. Yeah. So look at that. Yeah. Because it kind of just shows how his demeanor was during that drive. Now, if they wanted to present evidence of, in his 58 previous drives, there was an average of an alert of once every other drive. And like, do you know what I'm saying? Like, oh my God, that one, then we might be into the realm where it's going to take up more time than what's relevant, like the value of the relevancy. You with me? They call it in legal term, evidence law, the prejudicial effect outweighs the probative value. The Joe Samo just says, going to waste our freaking time. All right. I like my explanation better, but that's not the way the lawyers, they like to sound distinguished. Okay. The next one about this that like funny, these are funny little motions. I thought like Tesla wanted to make sure that the jury didn't know how much money it makes from the self-driving scam. No, scam. It's not a scam. That was a joke. All right. They didn't want the jury to know how much money Tesla makes. They didn't want the jury to know that Tesla had so many lawyers fighting this and that Tesla was spending how much money they were spending on defending this case. That kind of makes sense. They also didn't want the jury to know how much they were spending on their experts, all these different engineers that were going to testify. And there was a reason why they said, okay, well, the jury could know what we spent on the experts, like to have them at this particular case, but we don't want the jury to know how many times we've hired them because we don't want the jury to know that there's been a lot of other lawsuits over this self-driving thing, and then they filed a motion saying we don't want evidence of other car crashes because if there is evidence of other car crashes, then we're going to have to produce evidence of, let's say there's another car crash like 4 months before this particular one happened. All right. Then Tesla would say, okay, well, but if you present evidence of that car crash 4 months before this, we have to present evidence that, well, that car crash, the guy was on autopilot, but it wasn't our fault. It was actually a different driver that rear-ended him. Like, what the heck can we do? Or another driver came coming to him, or another driver ran a red light and hit him, or that the guy jerked the wheel at the last minute and that's what caused the wreck. Things like that. So Tesla said, we don't want all these other crashes to come into evidence because then we're gonna almost have, we call it a mini trial in the trial. Do you see what I'm saying? We're going to have all this evidence of all these other accidents. So we have to weigh in the law, what other examples are we going to include? The answer to that is generally, if there's some sort of general study, maybe if there's a crash that is very similar to this one and it happened before, that would be relevant because then a jury could think, well, they should have known about this particular issue. Do you see what I mean? But if it's something that's not really similar to this crash, then we shouldn't include it in evidence because it's going to take up too much freaking time. However, what do you think the family's lawyers want? They want everything in there. You know what I'm saying? But God, that'll take a long time, Zeke. I have a friend here visiting, my friend Jerry over here. He was having a bad day, and now that he's here, he's like, what am I doing? Okay. All right. Let's move on because there's always a lot more. The plaintiffs hired Dr. Andre. He is a human factors expert. What the fudge is that? Believe it or not, there are these people who get PhDs in the science of how humans interact with computer systems and machines. Isn't that crazy? Did you ever heard of a kid saying, when I grow up, I want to be a human factors expert? All right. So this one is they kind of the officially what these experts do is they try to see the foreseeability and kind of mitigating factors of how humans will interact with various computer systems or machines, so that if we, corporations, they want to be able to have certain things on the computer that will get people to want to buy more things, or get people to want to, remember certain things, or get people to then click on something. Do you know what I'm saying? Anyhow, so there's all these factors. The plaintiffs wanted to bring in this guy to say, well, the way the engineer was interacting with the Tesla was that he was more willing to use his cell phone and play video games during the drive and not have his hands on the wheel because of all these comments that Tesla made, because of the kind of advertisings that Tesla did, and the fact that it was called full, self-driving and things like that. And therefore, in his psychology, and it would be reasonable that humans would then rely on that computer function to drive the car itself, and they would then occupy themselves with other things like playing video games or texting or doing whatever the heck, and that is a reasonable human reaction. You with me? That's an interesting expert, right? Obviously, the plaintiffs want that expert to testify to the jury about that. And Tesla said, no, that's a stretch. He's not, you can't be an expert in what one person would do. Maybe, other people like, or a general idea, but it's hard to predict this. Everyone, you with me? All right. Obviously, here it would be fair that the ruling would be that that person can testify. Like that sounds like a reasonable testimony. Tesla had a very, very good response. I'm going to read one of their quotes here. Okay. They have their own expert, Tesla, that was going to testify in exactly what this game was and how they put together the allegation that he was playing the video game. Because it wasn't something that's just like everyone agreed he was playing a video game. It's actually very difficult to tell what somebody's doing on the phone, like after the fact. And obviously you can't ask him because he died. And then his iPhone 8 doesn't have a pin, or nobody knew what the pin was. So to open it, like it was kind of, then it loses some of the information. But get this, this is like a weird irony. I told you what he did for work, right? He was an Apple engineer and he got this iPhone 8 and it was a developmental model, meaning like so it could be tested out. But because of that, the Apple had extra tracking on that phone, not to see if he's on porn. Because he has this developmental phone, it had extra tracking on it. Isn't that a weird irony? I thought it was. Anyway, it had extra tracking on it. And because of that extra tracking on it, they were able to get more information than they would have had it been, somebody with a regular phone. And the data that was being transmitted during the drive was data that was consistent with that game. And he had that game app on his phone. You with me? So Tesla got an expert that said chances are, more likely than not, he was playing this game, but it's not a clear thing. Like it's not like, like stipulated facts are things like he had a 2017 car. He ran into the barrier. Everyone agreed he was going about 72 miles an hour. So there are stipulated facts. It wasn't stipulated that he was playing this game. So Tesla had to have an expert prove to the jury that he was playing this game. I think that's admissible evidence, right? It sounds about fair. If it's something like a stretch, like let's say, there was no data being transmitted or something like that, but they get an expert that says, even if no data is being transmitted, there is a possibility that he was playing a game. That would have probably been unlikely to be admissible. But all of these factors, it was all right. So this one quote that Tesla said in Mr. Usuri's opinion concerns information critical to both Tesla products misuse defense, meaning that he was misusing the product by not also paying attention, and the degree of Mr. Hong's admitted fault, namely whether Mr. Hong negligently misused his Model X by driving thousands of pounds of metal at over 70 miles an hour while playing an immersive video game on his cell phone. I love how they worded that. It was probably better than Joe Samo saying, what the fudge was he doing on his cell phone playing video games and now his family's suing for $10 million, right? They just don't talk like Joe Samo. It's like very, more eloquent, would you say? It's not as Joe, right? Yeah, I would tell the jury, come on, what are you thinking? The guy's on his video game and now the family wants $10 million and he wasn't paying attention? No, that would not be a Joe Samo thing to say. Okay, now remember the case settled. So we don't know how the actual jury would have come out, okay? I predict that the jury would have ruled against Tesla. That's my prediction. I could be wrong, we will never know. It's just like someone saying, I think the Padres are going to lose. They're down 8-0, right? Mateo was at the Padres game and the Padres were losing 8-0. You know what Mateo, big shot Padres fan, did? He left the game. And as soon as he left the game, the Padres ended up scoring 9 runs and won. Anyhow, okay. So obviously, so-called experts, it's hard to predict. I think the jury would have ruled that Tesla was at fault. And I'm going to tell you why. Because it didn't notice the lane markings. There's one other one. how did I forget this? The guy, this poor guy that died, he complained about that exact intersection before, the exact one. He complained to it to his wife and to a coworker saying, "Oh, when it's on the 101 near the 85 interchange, the car starts acting really goofy. You got to like take over because it's going toward the concrete barrier." He said those exact words, but he must have then thought it was fine. You know what I'm saying? The game was too good. Yeah, I guess so. He complained about it to his wife, and his wife testified to that. And she even testified that one time they were on that road, and he said, "This is where it's dangerous." Like, dude, isn't that's so crazy? I think all of that being the case, I still think the jury would have ruled that Tesla was at fault. Now, they could assign a percentage of fault to the guy, and maybe they would have said he's 50% at fault and Tesla's 50% at fault. Maybe they would have said he's 40% at fault, Tesla's 60% at fault. I think running into a concrete barrier, gosh darn it, is not good autopilot. I think all the quotes that Elon Musk said, people did start relying on that. I mean, Tesla got a little bit better, but saying, no, you absolutely have to have your hands on the wheel. Don't rely on this. Like after all these crashes, they got better, but I think that back then in 2018, it was kind of, everyone thought that this was the coolest technology and it was being boasted as such. And so I think it was reasonable that people started misrelying on the computer systems. And I think the jury would have, and plus it's a poor 2 kids and a mom. You know what I'm saying? So I think the jury would have ruled in favor of the family. And based on that, I think the settlement they gave the family was about $6 million. That's my guess. You think more or less? Maybe a little more. He was an Apple engineer, yeah, maybe a little more. And plus Tesla left the Bay Area to go to Texas, your home state of Texas. So maybe people would have just wanted to ream Tesla. It was happening here. The lawsuit was here in California. So anyway, Tesla settled. We'll never know the exact amount. My guess is $6 million. Hey, if you've been involved in a car crash, you can call Joe Samo, 619-672-1741. I'll sue everybody for you, damn it. As always, it's my pleasure to be here. Please hit me up with comments and questions. I love hearing from you.